My sister's kids were the golden grandchildren, private tutors, $8,500 camps, and a college fund my grandparents flaunted at dinner. At Grandma's birthday, she found out I quietly moved the trust into my name, and she lost it. She screamed, my dad dropped his fork, and Aunt said a sentence that made them freeze. I'm Miles, 32, older brother, only son, the responsible one when my parents felt like delegating responsibility, and the difficult one when I said no. I host a mid-sized podcast about work and money that somehow makes people think I'm both a walking ATM and a therapist. I live in a small one-bedroom with two mini cables, a foam panel wall I'm proud of, and a coffee grinder I treat better than most of my relatives. The story starts in my grandmother's dining room, because of course it does. Tulle bows on the chairs, a tower of cupcakes, photographs of Grandma through the decades, arranged like a museum exhibit curated by my aunt. My sister, Lila, breezed in late with her two kids in matching polos. The room tilted toward them like sunflowers. Make room for the golden ones, Aunt Bev sang. The future of this family. I was already at the kids' table because my mom said the main table needed balance. Whatever that meant. Grandma waved a hand at me. Miles, you're by the outlet. Perfect for your pod show. Podcast, I said. Dad clapped me on the shoulder like I'd gotten a participation ribbon. At least he's got a hobby. Then the first trigger landed, clean as a slap. Lila leaned over the main table, kissed Grandma's cheek, and said loudly, we came straight from the tutor. 2 hours of Latin. And don't even ask what that camp cost. $8,500 for 4 weeks. Worth every penny for our college track. Everyone made astonished noises, the kind people make when they plan to repeat the number in the parking lot. Mom said, and they have the college fund. Thank heavens. Your grandfather had such foresight. Our college fund, Lila corrected, grinning, the trust. Remember? She winked at Grandma. The way you flaunt it at dinner is iconic. Grandma laughed like a bell. I do like to remind you children of your blessings. I check my phone because that's what I do when I'm angry. I pretend to read the weather. Across the table, Uncle Rob asked, Miles, what's new with your episodes? Interviews, I said. He nodded like I'd confirmed a diagnosis. Speaking of episodes, you should do one about parents who don't save for college. Thankfully, this family knows better. Thankfully, my mom echoed, looking straight at me like gratitude had a face and it wasn't mine. Forks clinked. Someone put on a playlist, and the speeches started. Grandma loved speeches. I stared at the banner that said, Happy 78th, Queen, and tried not to think about the folder on my laptop labeled Trust. Final. I looked at Lila's kids, who were nice enough, and at the adults who never learned the difference between generous and performative. Then Grandma lifted her glass. To family, she said, and to the grandchildren we invest in. A pause. A smile. And that was my line, the one I have replayed in my head since I was 12. Invest in the ones who matter. Mom laughed. Hear, hear. I pushed my chair back. Grandma, I said, as mild as I could manage, about the trust. Not now, sweetie, she said, voice sugared. Let's not talk money at dinner. Lila smirked. We can talk later. You wouldn't understand the details anyway. I swallowed. You'd be surprised. Money existed in our house like weather. Inescapable, always moving, always someone's fault. When I was 12, Grandpa opened an educational trust for the grandchildren. Back then it meant me and future whoever. The trust was a story Grandma loved to tell. We sacrifice for education, she'd say, looking at me like a lesson. We prioritize the ones who will make us proud. Then Lila had kids. And the word grandchildren started to mean something that didn't include me at all. We grew up working class adjacent. 2 incomes, 1 inherited house, a savings account my mother called thin. Every time I wanted something, soccer cleats, a TI, 84, Mom would sigh and say, ask your grandfather about the fund. He'd chuckle and change the subject. We didn't use it. We displayed it. Like the nice plates. By the time I was 19, I was editing audio at 2 a.m. for a sports show that fired me over text. I took barista shifts, learned to EQ in earbuds, and taught myself just enough web stuff to post episodes at stupid o'clock. Lila, 2 years younger, mastered the family tradition of being adored. Miles is so intense, she'd say. You should have fun. Fun had a price tag. I had rent. When she had her first child, the trust got loud. Our golden grandbaby. Grandma would coo, tapping a manila folder. She'd tell waiters about the fund like it was a dessert special. Private school, private tutor, private everything. $8,500 camp, darling. They learn STEM and sailing. Best three letters in this house. Roy. Meanwhile, I was Venmo requesting my dad for my own birthday dinner because he forgot his wallet. I don't pretend I was perfect. I missed birthdays, canceled on Lila's brunches, ducked family photos. I was hustling and ashamed of hustling. The podcast scraped, then grew, then dipped, then spiked. Ads came in. I learned how to read mid-rolls without sounding like a hostage. I started a Patreon. I paid off a credit card in a burst of joy so intense I cried into a towel. And still, the family script never changed. Miles, your sister's kids have needs. Don't be selfish. Your podcast is cute. The first big fracture was the group chat incident. Lila dropped a picture of the kids with their tutor. The kids looked bored. The tutor looked rich. Lila wrote, 2 hours a week, worth every penny. College path secured. Grandma replied with 8 clapping emojis, and then, so glad we set up their trust young. I typed, wasn't the trust for all the grandchildren? Mom, stop stirring Miles. Lila, you don't even have kids. Grandma, we're talking about actual grandchildren, dear. I stared at that message until my phone locked. Actual grandchildren. Cool. I called Grandpa. His voice had grown thin. It was meant to be fair, he said. To help you both with education. Lila used it for camp. Camp can be educational. Can it be $8,500 educational? He sighed. Talk to your grandmother. Talking to Grandma meant being told I was dramatic. She said I should be grateful the family had anything at all. Don't be crass, Miles. College costs money. I said, I went to college. I'm still paying interest. She said, well, you chose audio. As if I'd chosen to be allergic to money on purpose. Then Grandpa died. And the trust, quiet for 6 months, woke up. At the will reading, there was a paragraph everyone missed except me. It named me and Lila as co-beneficiaries of an educational trust, with a successor trustee to be appointed by the co-beneficiaries in the event of mismanagement. I looked at the word mismanagement until it blurred. I had receipts, the camp invoices Lila bragged about, the private ski weekends for their development, the tutor package renamed enrichment in the bank memos Grandma wrote herself. I asked the lawyer if enrichment counted. He raised an eyebrow. If it's not post-secondary education or direct academic cost, it's arguably outside the trust purpose. Arguably, I said. He shrugged. If you care to argue. I did. And I didn't. My show was finally paying me real money. I was finally sleeping. Did I want a war with my family? No. Did I want to stop being told I was less than actual family? Yes. So I read. I read trust law until the words felt like a second language. I learned about fiduciary duty and successor trustees and the difference between education and enrichment. I started a folder called Trust Drafts. I asked myself the question I ask guests on my show. What would this look like if you respected your future self? It looked like boundaries. It looked like tracking expenses. It looked like emails instead of phone calls. It looked like a paper trail. When I asked for statements, Grandma stalled. The printer's broken, dear. Lila said, this is so toxic. Mom said, we were just keeping things simple. Simple meant me paying my own student loan while their kids learned Latin on my grandfather's dime. The tutor became a symbol. The camp an argument. In a family dinner, Aunt Bev lifted a glass and said, to our investor queen. Grandma preened, I do love a portfolio. And then she told, in loving detail, the story of how she negotiated the camp down from $9,200 to $8,500. Always be shrewd, she told the table. Protect principle. Protect principle. Cool. I walked to the bathroom, locked the door, and stared at myself in the mirror until my face looked like a stranger's. Then I did what I do best, research. I found the clause. I found the path. I found a bank officer who used phrases like within scope and successor appointment. The trust language allowed a change in trustees with the consent of both beneficiaries, or, if there was evidence of misuse, by petition with notice. Consent wasn't happening. Evidence was. Grandma's birthday fell on a Sunday. Everyone wore their church smiles. I wore a black button-down I reserved for live recordings and funerals. At 2 p.m., the sheet cake arrived. At 2:15, Aunt Bev made her queen of compound interest toast. At 2:20, Lila announced the kids' camp recital. The tutor says they're gifted. She made gifted sound like a brand. Grandma basked. And we'll always make sure they have what they need. I had promised myself I wouldn't do it during the soup course. I would wait for coffee. But then Mom leaned across the table and said, Miles, you didn't forget Grandma's check, did you? Even a small one is fine. She did so much for you. I laughed. It came out wrong. For me. Don't be ungrateful, Dad said. No one likes a tally keeper. I set down my spoon. About the tally, I said quietly, we should talk. Lila rolled her eyes. Here we go. Grandma lifted her palm. Not at dinner. I opened my phone and turned the screen so only she could see. It's already done. Her smile didn't slip at first. Then she focused. The bank email. The word successor trustee accepted. My name. What is this? She asked. The trust had a successor clause, I said, voice small but steady. Misuse triggers it. The bank agreed. The lawyer filed notice. Effective last week, I'm the trustee. Lila laughed like I'd told a bad joke. You? You don't even have kids. You wouldn't know what a child needs if it bit you. The trust isn't for camps, I said. It's for college. Post-secondary. Tuition. Books. I checked. Grandma's face cracked. You moved it into your name? Into my trusteeship, I said. Different. She stood up so fast her chair screeched. How dare you? Conversations around the room stopped like someone had pulled the plug. Dad's fork dropped. The ping traveled. Miles, he said, voice low in the way he uses before a lecture. Fix this. Mom's lips were a knife. After all we've done for you. Lila pointed at me. You're stealing from my kids. I kept my hands under the table so no one would see them shake. No one's stealing. The trust is intact. I'll approve college expenses. I'll pay tuition directly. But enrichment and $8,500 camps are out. Aunt Bev whispered, Is this legal? From the far end of the table, the quietest person in the room spoke. My aunt by marriage, who never raises her voice, said one sentence that sliced the air in half. Ask why the statements were hidden. Everything froze. Grandma blinked. Excuse me. Aunt Joy folded her napkin. I asked for statements when I co-signed Lila's preschool deposit, remember? You told me the trust wasn't public. That's when I realized you weren't tracking properly. So, yes, ask why the statements were hidden. Lila turned on her. Joy, not helpful. Joy didn't flinch. Helpful would have been following the rules. The room filled with noises, a glass set down too hard, a child's chair scraping, someone whispering, oh my God. Grandma's voice returned, jagged. I did what was best. For whom? I asked. She pointed a shaking finger at me. You have always resented them. I looked at the kids. The oldest one stared at his napkin, shoulders high around his ears. They're not the problem. The rules are the rules. Dad stood. Give it back. It's not a piggy bank, I said. It's a trust. And I'm done being the villain because I know how to read. The fallout was a group text that felt like a fire alarm. First, Lila. You've humiliated us. The kids are crying. You've ruined Grandma's birthday. Then Mom. You heartless boy. Fix this or don't come around anymore. Then Dad. Call me. Man to man. We'll sort it out. I didn't call. I emailed. I wrote like a podcaster who edits out ums for a living. Clean, time-stamped, impossible to misread. I attached the trust document with the relevant sections highlighted. I attached the bank officer's note. I attached a summary of disallowed expenses, with a conciliatory paragraph that said I'd cover this semester's tutor out of my own pocket so the kids wouldn't be the ones to take the hit while adults adjusted. Lila replied in 10 seconds, Keep your blood money. Joy wrote privately, Proud of you. This is the first non-crazy thing in this family since 2004. Grandma didn't text for 3 days. When she did, it was a voicemail that started with a sigh and turned into a monologue about loyalty. She said words like betrayal, ungrateful, show off. She ended with, You'll regret this when you have your own. I pressed the message into the silence of my apartment and let it sit there. On my desk, a sticky note, Respect your future self. I opened my bank app, paid my student loan, then closed it without taking a screenshot for once. The show went on. I recorded an episode about boundary budgets, how to allocate money and attention when your family runs on expectations. The inbox exploded. People told me about cousins who used grandma's medical fund for a destination wedding, about brothers who bought jet skis with college money. I cried twice, muted my mic, and kept going. A week later, Dad called. Son, he said, overly warm. Can we meet at the diner? I chose a public place and arrived early. He slid into the booth, ordered coffee he didn't drink, then leaned forward. Your grandmother is upset. I noticed. He rubbed his eyes. She feels disrespected. I moved the trustee role per the clause. I know. He tried for a smile. Look, maybe we could make a family agreement. You put your sister back in charge. We'll all forgive and forget. You can even be a co-signer, if that makes you feel respected. The way he said respected made me want to flip the table. I didn't. I breathed, like my therapist taught me. Dad, we can use it for tuition, fees, books. Anything else is a no. That's the agreement. He sat back. You sound like your show. That's not an insult. He exhaled, then tried a different route. Your grandmother's afraid of losing face. She lost track. Those are different. Family is messy. So is math. He stared at me. I don't recognize you lately. I finally recognized myself. The door chimed. A busboy laughed. Life continued. We settled into a new rhythm. Beige holidays without me. Texts I didn't answer right away. Uninvites disguised as, we thought you'd be busy. I sent the school their 1,099 Q forms. I sent the university bursar an email confirming direct tuition payment when the time came. Lila sent me a screenshot of an unpaid enrichment invoice with the caption, Monster. I didn't reply. Then a weird thing happened. My cousin Nate, quiet, anxious, always on the edge of family group photos, called me. I heard what you did, he said. It made me ask my parents about my 529. He paused. There isn't one. I'm sorry. I'm not calling to dump on you. I'm calling because hearing you say no gave me permission to ask. And now I'm opening my own account. Even if it's $50 a month. We talked about compounding interest. I sent him my budgeting spreadsheet. He sent me a picture of his dog in a sweater. It was the best conversation I'd had with a relative in years. The day tuition came due for Lila's oldest, I paid it directly to the university and CC'd Lila, my parents, and Grandma. No note. No flourish. Just a copy of the transaction and the balance remaining. Lila wrote back, fine. Which, in our family, was a peace treaty. Grandma stayed nuclear. She asked friends at church for prayer for a wayward grandson. Aunt Bev sent me passive-aggressive memes about honoring your elders. Mom tried guilt by dessert. She left a cake at my door. The frosting said, family first. It melted slightly in the afternoon sun and looked like a horror prop. I took a photo, then ate a corner and threw the rest out. My therapist asked how I was sleeping. Better, I said. I felt unhooked. Not free exactly, but unstuck. On air, I told a story about financial gaslighting. When people tell you that enforcing rules is cruel, that budgets are betrayals. I said, setting a boundary doesn't make you hard, it makes you honest. The episode charted. A sponsor asked to extend. The team I'd assembled, 2 part-timers, 1 editor, sent confetti emojis. I bought them lunch. Sometime in there, Grandma texted. If you insist on playing banker, at least visit. I went. She poured tea like it was an apology, then didn't apologize. We sat in her over-decorated living room, floral everywhere, gold frames reflecting back a dozen versions of us. You hurt me, she said. You embarrassed me, I said. Is that what you wanted? Revenge? No, I wanted fairness. She tapped the table. Fairness is not the same as love. I know, I said. That's why I chose fairness. Love gets confused in this family. She looked at me for a long time. You are so sure. I'm sure about this. Do you think you're better than us? I think I'm allowed to be equal. She looked away, blinked hard, and changed the subject to hydrangeas. We talked about flowers for 10 minutes, and I left feeling like I'd escaped a maze without a map. Grandma's birthday lives rent-free in my head, but it doesn't burn like it did. Now when I think of that day, I remember my aunt's sentence more than Grandma's scream. Ask why the statements were hidden. It's the kind of question I ask strangers on my show every week. It cut through the noise. Here's what changed. I stopped treating peace as my job. I stopped auditioning for actual grandchild. I stopped calling fairness cruelty. I learned that a quiet no is louder than a loud yes, especially in families that only hear applause. I also learned that protecting kids doesn't mean bankrupting boundaries. I paid a university bill without sending a selfie, and the world didn't end. I refused to fund a camp and survive the group chat. Lala has not forgiven me. She might not for years. That's not a tragedy. That's a recalibration. The moral is not win the argument. The moral is own the responsibility you're already carrying. For me, that meant reading the document everyone referenced like scripture and following it like a map. It meant telling the truth in a room that prefers a good story. It meant remembering that the person I have to live with most is me. I'm still Miles. I still oversalt my eggs and line up my XLR cables by length. I still record on Tuesday mornings, edit on Wednesday nights, and drink coffee like it's a hobby. Sometimes I think about how different the story would sound if Grandma had led with, "I messed up." Maybe we would have laughed about the $8,500 sailing lessons in 20 years. Maybe not. The kids? I'm rooting for them. I hope they learn Latin and how to call a boundary by its name. I hope they never learn to equate love with a check. When they're ready for college, the money will be there, because that's what the trust was for. And when they ask me why the camp got a no, I'll show them the clause and say, I respected your future, even when your parents hated me for it. Last week I got a message from a listener. She wrote, I told my brother I'm not his bank anymore. I put it in writing. I slept for the first time. I smiled in my kitchen, overbrewed coffee in my hand, phone buzzing with small thank yous from strangers. It felt like proof that doing the right thing rarely looks heroic in the moment. It looks like paperwork. It looks like somebody yelling at a birthday party. It looks like leaving a cake on a hot porch and walking away. I'm not the family ATM. I'm not the scapegoat. I'm not the villain in a story about actual grandchildren. I'm a person with limits. I put my name on a line I used to pretend wasn't there. And I'm keeping it there. I won't be used. I won't finance the performance. I'll pay what's owed. I'll document what's said. And I'll keep my hands under the table until they stop shaking. Then I'll pick up the mic, hit record, and tell the truth again.